My great-grandfather, who I was lucky enough to get to know, he didn't live long enough to see the Cubs win the World Series, but he never lost hope. He used to say, Dylan, anyone can have a bad century. He was an optimist. We are about to pass under the bridge that is carrying Michigan Avenue across the Chicago River. Michigan Avenue is home to the Magnificent Mile, which starts out here on your right-hand side and goes on for, you guessed it, 1 mile. Lots of restaurants and shopping out on Michigan Ave. If you want recommendations for what to check out while you're here in town, just grab me after the tour. Happy to point out some stuff you may want to know. And then down on the other side of Michigan Avenue, on the other side of the river, is where stuff like Millennium Park, which is where the Cloud Gate or the Beam is located. It's also where the Art Institute of Chicago and plenty of great restaurants are down on that part of Michigan as well. Eyes up to the statue on the top of the building that looks a bit like the Oscar Award. That is the Chicago Board of Trade building. Statue up top is done by John Storrs, and it is of the Roman goddess Ceres, who was the goddess of the harvest. And the first thing they traded on those trading floors were grain futures. It may feel far away here in the big city, but Chicago is only about an hour, maybe 90 minutes tops, from farmland that goes on until you hit the Rocky Mountains. The tall blue building with those letters on the side and the spire up at the very top, this is Trump Tower, home to the Trump International Hotel and Residences. Trump Tower is the second tallest building in the city of Chicago, standing at a height of 1,388 feet tall, or 423 meters tall. It was completed in 2009 by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill chief architect Adrian Smith. If you stood Trump Tower next to the St. Regis from a moment ago, you might assume that the St. Regis was taller, because the St. Regis's roof that he called the 1909 Plan for Chicago. And part of that plan involved keeping Lake Michigan's shorefront open. Lake Michigan is all out to your left-hand side right now. There are about 26 miles of shoreline here in the city. So how are you going to keep all of Lake Michigan open when Chicago is a huge city with all sorts of lake-bound traffic? Well, Burnham's plan was to build 5 piers dotting the shoreline to help centralize all of that traffic. Only one pier was ever constructed, which was Navy Pier. It's over on your left-hand side right now. You can see the Ferris wheel up on the top of the building. Navy Pier was completed in 1916. When it first opened, it was known as Municipal. Facade with the curvy-looking edges. This is the St. Regis Chicago. St. Regis was completed in 2020. It's a mixed-use hotel and residential building, and it is the 3rd tallest building in the city, standing at a height of 1,191 feet tall, or 363 meters tall if you are into that sort of thing. At that height of 1,191 feet, Lakeshore Drive makes the cut because of its close proximity to the lakefront and its traverse to the center of town. The building should be in conversation with those surroundings. Jeannie Gang is often inspired by aquatic features of the area nearby, so the 6 shades of green glass that make up the facade of the building, along with those curvy-looking edges, are meant to make you think of the water of the Chicago River located down below. This is the first of many super tall structures that I'll share with you here this afternoon. And with a super tall structure, you are going to deal with super strong wind, especially right here off Lake Michigan. So I'll point out how this building manages sway. Tall buildings sway in the wind. That is a feature, not a bug. And over here on your right is the near north side neighborhood of Streeterville. With each of those community areas broken up into neighborhoods, there are well over 150 places around town that Chicagoans call home. Our next building is going to be up in front of us on the right-hand side of the river. It's got that white facade with the clock tower up there at the top. That is the Wrigley Building. Wrigley Building was completed in 1924, and when it opened, it was the headquarters of the Wrigley Company. William Wrigley made his millions selling chewing gum, and he built himself a pretty little office tower here on the banks of the Chicago River. This building is in the Spanish Revival style of architecture. If you've ever been to or seen pictures of Madrid or Barcelona, you might think that this building could fit in on those city streets. And it gets its unique white facade from the $250,000 glazed terracotta. We would know where you're talking about, where all the tall buildings are, and where the business district and the cultural district are, but we don't really call our downtown downtown. Chicago has a north side, a west side. passenger walk L train across the Wells Street Bridge. If you find yourself at $3 burning a hole in your pocket while you're here in Chicago, you can hop on a brown or purple line train anywhere in the loop. They'll take you for a little spin around the center of town, and then you will cross over this bridge here. The Chicago Transit Authority that runs the trains and buses here in town is the third busiest transit system in the United States, and it moves around hundreds of here. Why is the third largest city in the United States here on this part of Lake Michigan and not anywhere else? And the answer is very simple. It is because of the river we're on right now. The South Branch of the Chicago River carries on for quite some ways, and it gets very nearly close to the Des Plaines River. But those two rivers do not naturally connect. Here on the Chicago River, we're connected to Lake Michigan and the rest of the Great Lakes watershed. And down on the Des Plaines, they are connected to the Mississippi River and then eventually the Gulf of Mexico. So for thousands of years, Native American people and later the fur trappers who came after them used what is known as the Chicago Portage, or the Chicago Portage if you are feeling French. It's an area where those two rivers get their fresh drinking water. And so in the late 1800s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers came to Chicago to help save us from ourselves. They did not do that by cleaning the river. They dug a canal that connects the South Branch down to the Des Plaines, which literally runs downhill. So once the canal was mostly completed, gravity started pulling water standing on down here at its base. Look, I'm on a building. Over on the left-hand side of the river, you will see a tall blue building with those trident support structures down here at the river level. This is the Bank of America Tower. If you are a Bank of America customer, up in front of us on the right-hand side of the river, you will see passed a resolution that formally pardoned Mrs. O'Leary and her cow. There was nothing else going on in the 90s we had to pay attention to. It was bovine pardons number 1. Gum, William Wrigley made his millions selling chewing gum. That flavor debuted back in 1893. World's first moving sidewalk was put up for the World's Fair. The world's first Ferris wheel was erected. It was meant to compete with the Eiffel Tower. You got another 𝐂𝐴𝐿 Tower. This one is from the 1980s. It is called River City, and it is a sibling of the 𝐂𝐴𝐿 Towers downtown. It was done by the same architect, Bertrand Goldberg, and it is another... Did you step out onto one of those boxes? Y'all are braver than I am. Up there on the 103rd floor is the Sears Tower's observation deck. It is called the Sky Deck. If you have not gone yet, it is totally worth the trip. I personally am a giant baby when it comes to heights. I've been up there many times. I think it's very, very cool. You have unparalleled views of the city, and on a clear day, you can see into Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan. You also have the opportunity to step out onto one of those glass boxes. They call them the designed to make you think of the Sphinx at Giza. It's got that river-facing public plaza down at the bottom of the building that is flanked on either side by those structures. Those are meant to make you think of the paws of the Sphinx. And then the front of the building is where the man's face would be. I think if you squint a little bit, the reflection of the Opera House and the windows over here sort of point. On every other floor, you'll notice that the windows are tinted green, and that is to match the river water down below. And then on the other floors, the windows are tinted blue to match the sky above. If you're from Chicago, you would recognize this building from hanging out down here by the river. If you are not from Chicago, you may recognize this building from a little documentary called Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This was the office building where Ferris Bueller's dad worked. It's where he watched the parade from, and it was used as that filming location only months after construction was completed. Down along the right-hand side of the river is the Chicago River Walk, which is this pathway that is following the river's edge. The River Walk was part of Daniel Burnham's plan for Chicago. He thought Chicagoans should and would want to have access to their river. It would take us over 100 years to make the River Walk a reality. This section was completed in 2016, and it runs from here in Wolf Point all the way down to Lake Michigan. Now, even before the Riverwalk was completed, Chicagoans spent plenty of time down by the river. We use it as one of our major gathering grounds here in this green building with that gold feature up in the top. That is the Carbide and Carbon building. Carbide and Carbon went up during Prohibition here in the United States when the sale of alcohol was federally prohibited. The building was designed by the Burnham brothers, who were sons of Daniel Burnham, that guy who published the plan for Chicago. And the Burnham brothers did not agree with prohibition. They thought it was a silly idea. And so as a little bit of a Rockefeller salute to the folks in Washington who came up with prohibition, they designed a terracotta tiles that make up the sides of the building, meant to make you think of the green glass of a bottle of wine, and that gold feature up top is meant to make you think of the foil on a champagne's cork. That is real 24-karat gold up on the top of that building, and it's been hammered down to be about half as thick as a sheet of plastic wrap. The building is home to a lovely little rooftop bar and restaurant called 𝐿𝐴𝐻. So if you are so inclined while you're here in town, you can go up into a giant bottle of champagne and order yourself a glass of champagne, which has a sort of poetry to it. I like it, I'm into it, I think it's fun. Over on the right-hand side of the river, in just a second here, you'll see a skinny blue building that says London House up at the very top, and then it carries on to the left of that. That is the LondonHouse Hotel, which is home to one of the most popular rooftop bars here in the city. Again, if you want to check them out, I highly recommend it. You got beautiful views of downtown and of the river. If you go up there to buy yourself a drink, you will spend a couple of dollars. But it is worth it for the views alone. That is, again, the LondonHouse Hotel. And the LondonHouse and the 𝐁𝐵 building are both located on Michigan Avenue, just south of the river. Now, Chicago is the anchor of the largest media market in the Midwest. We have two major newspapers in town nowadays. The second largest by circulation is the Chicago Sun-Times, and the largest newspaper in town is the Chicago Tribune. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Tribune was owned by a man whose name was Robert McCormick, and he wanted the most beautiful office tower on earth to house his newspaper. He put up $100,000 in a contest for whoever could design it. If you're hanging out on Michigan Avenue later, check out Tribune Tower. Down at the street level, it is embedded with rocks and bricks and stones from important places around the world, including the pyramids, the Great Wall of China, and Edinburgh Castle, among many, many others. They're all labeled up there on the side of the building, so you can take yourself a little tour of the world just by walking out Michigan Avenue. Over on the left-hand side of the river, you will see a tall, gray Indiana limestone building with those vertical racing stripes made by the inset windows into the facade, which are leading your eyes up to the NBC Peacock logo. This is NBC Tower. Now, NBC Tower checks all the boxes of Art Deco architecture, so you might reasonably assume this would be an Art Deco building. But Art Deco really only refers to buildings that went up in the 1920s and 30s here in the United States. This building